Jennifer Nuzzo. I'm the director of the Pandemic Center at the Brown University School of Public Health. And we're going to watch some movies.
You know what you are? I'm not infected.
I want you to move away from the table.
You want to firebomb the town of Cedar Creek, California.
Oh, how long have you been like this?
Since 1918. That's when Carlisle found me, dying of Spanish influenza.
So, as an epidemiologist who studies pandemics, it hadn't occurred to me that an effect that we could see after a pandemic is an increase in incidence in vampiric activity. But I guess it's somewhat heartening to know that perhaps something that could come out of something as really devastating as the 1918 grain influenza pandemic is a creature like Edward Cullen. May we all be so lucky. I do have to say he calls it the Spanish influenza, which that was what it was called at a time. It was noticed in soldiers who had been in Spain. It was also happening during World War I, and that's one of the reasons why people think maybe young people were so devastated by this virus, in part because they were all congregated in really difficult circumstances fighting the war.
Fungal infection of this kind is real, but not in humans.
True, fungi cannot survive if its host's internal temperature is over 94 degrees. But what if that were to change? What if, for instance, the world were to get slightly warmer?
So I really love this clip for a number of reasons. I just have to comment on the scientists smoking while commenting on catastrophic harms to human health. It's just kind of funny. Fungi are a serious disease, and he is right in many ways that as the world warms, we should expect to see more fungal infections. In fact, we are already seeing more fungal infections. Fungus affecting humans, I think, is a different story, as is said in the clip. Fungi have a heat barrier, meaning that humans are typically too warm for fungi to be that happy in us. Fungal infections in humans do happen, but it's often in people who have some immunosuppression that make them more amenable to it. I think another thing that's interesting is that this flashback clip is set in 1968, which was actually a year that we had a pandemic. And that pandemic was caused by the exact thing that the scientists sort of disregarded. It was caused by an influenza virus.
The patient was admitted a week ago after a car accident. He's had no contact with anyone in isolation.
It's airborne.
So this clip is a really nice reference to an experiment that was actually done in the 1960s at a military hospital in Baltimore, a veterans hospital in Baltimore, where researchers were trying to understand how military personnel were getting sick with tuberculosis. They had tuberculosis patients in a ward that was connected via the air ducts to another room where they had guinea pigs. Over a multi-year period, they found that the guinea pigs who were connected via the air ducts would get infected with tuberculosis, and that provided some of the first evidence that tuberculosis is an airborne pathogen. This movie was based on a book that was written by Richard Preston. The book was called The Hot Zone, and Richard Preston was a journalist, wrote for The New Yorker, did a lot of research for his books, including talking to experts, including my former mentor, Dr. D.A. Henderson. So his books tended to be more factual than some other popular accounts of outbreaks. This movie, though, was very loosely based on that book and not quite as accurate as Richard Preston's telling.
A day, 3 to 5 times every waking minute. In between, we're touching doorknobs, water fountains, elevator buttons, and each other. Those things become fomites.
I need to walk the government through this before we start to freak everybody out. I mean, we can't even tell people right now what they should be afraid of. We tried that with swine flu, and all we did was get healthy people scared.
So fomites are little droplets that are produced when you cough or sneeze that then kind of land on surfaces. They may be in the air for just a little bit, very close to you, but mostly they fall on surfaces. People then can pick them up by touching the surfaces and then touching their eyes or their nose or their mouth. It's really interesting that they're kind of debating whether or not they should talk to the public about this, because what you would tell people to do to reduce the risk of fomite transmission is to wash your hands, which doesn't seem like like a particularly controversial message. There's also a debate in this clip about what to say to whom and when. And I think that's also kind of a central challenge in public health, which is like you want to, alert the public, you want to make messages clear, but there's often political ramifications of this. And, will the political leaders sign off on the messages that are being sent? One hopes that the science would be able to be said freely and that there wouldn't be a debate about that, but there often is a debate about how to warn people, and warn people in a way that's going to be productive. Obviously, you don't want to scare people. I would always say that people are smart and people can handle information. You just have to give them the information they need and then tell them what to do about it. But there often is sort of a knee-jerk worry in governments about, well, if we tell people this, maybe we're going to unnecessarily scare them. I would say it's always better to be forthcoming about what you know and what you don't know rather than not, and then have the information come out via other means, in which case you could quickly lose credibility and trust. A lot of these clips have in common is that they often give too much information. And one of the biggest challenges when you're dealing with outbreaks and pandemics is the speed with which you gather information to figure out what's going on. Even though they play that uncertainty up as part of the tension in the films, the reality is it takes much longer to figure out what's going on and to figure out how to solve it. And so I think sometimes they create these scientists as like omniscient beings. Even though they're a little bit confused in the beginning, it doesn't take very long until they figure it all out. And while I have enormous faith in science and scientists to figure out the answer to the world's most pressing problems, I fear that we are creating expectations of just omnipotent powers. We're talking about these films in the context right now of seeing really an unprecedented attempt to unravel our scientific agencies and unravel the funding streams that make scientific discovery and the discovery of cures and figuring out how best to protect people that make all of that possible. So I really worry that we're one of these scenarios to happen today or even in a few months that would be far less able to do what we could even do under the best of circumstances. I'm always a bit frustrated when there are outbreak movies because they make great stories. They are terrifying, they are scary, there's a lot of tension, they kind of speak to some of our greatest fears about, our health, that we may have to fear our friends and neighbors. That from the perspective of thinking about how you maintain a democracy, what greater assault could there be on a democracy than something that not only harms the people of a country, but makes them turn on each other? I just wish that we could find a way to tell a story of what works, a more optimistic story, one where we beat the virus, that we take action before the event actually even happens to make sure that if it shows up in our midst, that we are safe from it because we have taken the precautions and we've done the planning in advance. I'd like to tell, the happy story, the fairy tale where it all works out because we've decided it will be so. But I guess that's probably harder to sell in the movie theaters. Thanks for watching with me. I'm Jennifer Nuzzo. I'm director of the Pandemic Center at Brown University School of Public Health.